and sentence you to life in prison.
Imagine a place where life hangs by a thread,
Full sentence of death.
every moment filled with tension.
You're going to spend the rest of your natural life in prison.
Welcome to the most dangerous capital punishment row, where every second counts and every word carries weight. Today, we'll explore haunting stories of inmates facing execution, each revealing deep emotions, selfishness drowning in regret, defiance masking fear. From Ted Bundy's unsettling calm to Timothy McVeigh's chilling acceptance, these tales expose the complexities of guilt and innocence. Stay tuned, you won't want to miss what's next. Number 20. Robert Charles Towery. Robert Charles Towery was executed by lethal injection, which is a grim irony considering his crime. He was convicted in 1991 of putting battery acid into his victim during a robbery before strangling him to his ultimate end. The victim was a generous philanthropist who had lent Towery money and hired him as a mechanic. Towery revealed a profound love for his family in his closing hours. He also apologized to his victim's family, admitting the pain he had caused. His final words were peculiar: potato, potato, potato. This was not a random act. It was a secret message intended for his nephew. The expression refers to the sound of a Harley-Davidson motorcycle's engine idling, which Towery used to signal that everything was well. Towery's execution demonstrated the devastating results of a life full of wrong decisions. His dying remarks expressed both remorse and a desire for connection, exemplifying the complexities of human emotion in the face of capital punishment. The combination of sincere love for his family and a whimsical reference demonstrates how people may maintain their relationships even in the most challenging situations. His final words express sadness and a longing for peace. Number 19. Douglas Roberts. On May 18, 1996, Douglas Roberts was condemned to capital punishment for taking the life of Jerry Velez in San Antonio, Texas. He said he was stoned out of his mind throughout the crime. In a videotaped police interview, Roberts admitted to repeatedly stabbing Velez and then running over his body with his automobile. In January 1997, a jury found him guilty of capital punishment. On April 20, 2005, as he prepared for execution, Roberts made an unexpected statement. He said, "I've been lingering around this popsicle stand for far too long. I want to tell you everything. When I die, bury me deep, place 2 speakers at my feet, put on some headphones, and rock and roll me. I will see you in heaven someday." He said these remarks with a smile, only seconds before the end-of-life medications were administered. Even as he approached his end, Roberts' final comments exhibited a blend of comedy and a love of music. His confession and dying comments reflect the intricacies of his character, a guy who committed a heinous crime but sought solace through music in his final hours. His story serves as a sharp reminder of the choices that lead to catastrophic ends, as well as the unexpected ways people express their emotions when faced with the ultimate end. Number 18. Juan Martin Garcia. On September 17, 1998, a gang member named Juan Martin Garcia fatally shot Hugo Solano, a Christian missionary who had recently relocated from Mexico to Houston. The robbery netted barely $8, but it ended in horror. Garcia was convicted of capital punishment and sentenced to die on June 21, 2000. Kirchmeier and other experts believe that offenders' final words can serve as a reflection on their deeds and lives. Frequently, these last words reflect remorse and repentance. Kirchmeier explains that such words are consistent with what we hope to hear and can bring solace to families touched by the tragedy. Garcia apologized to Solano's widow and children in his dying remarks on October 6, 2015, only seconds before being executed. He continued, "The harm that I did to your dad and husband, I hope this brings you closure." He said, "I never wanted to hurt any of you all." Garcia's final comments demonstrated his knowledge of the pain he had inflicted. His apology was an attempt to provide some peace to Solano's family, showing that he understood the consequences of his conduct. Even in his final hours, Garcia reflected on his decisions, leaving a letter emphasizing the importance of understanding and healing following such a heartbreaking loss. Number 17. Wallace Wilkerson. Wallace Wilkerson was sentenced to capital punishment in 1877 in Utah Territory for taking the life of William Baxter. This sad tragedy occurred as a card game escalated into a heated confrontation. Wilkerson, a stockbroker and military drummer, admitted to the crime. When given the option of execution, he selected the firing squad over decapitation or hanging. On the day of his execution, May 16, 1879, Wilkerson sat in a chair holding a cigar and refused to be blindfolded. He said, "I give you my word. I plan to die as a man," looking my executioners straight in the eye. His bravado represented his resolve to confront his fate fearlessly. When the firing squad gave the order to fire, the first round of bullets missed Wilkerson's heart. In a state of astonishment and panic, he bolted from the chair and exclaimed, "Oh my God! Oh my God! They've missed!" His anguished plea reflected the truth of his circumstances. Wilkerson struggled to breathe for 15 to 27 minutes, according to various witness accounts, before bleeding to his demise. This execution did not go as planned, demonstrating the cruel and unpredictable nature of capital punishment. Wilkerson's final moments were fraught with pain and fear, leaving a chilling legacy in the history of executions. Number 16. John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy was a dangerous individual. He was convicted of ending the life of 33 young men. Gacy earned the nickname Assailant Clown after dressing up as a clown and performing at children's parties. He was caught in 1978, and the public was appalled by his crimes. On May 10, 1994, Gacy was executed by lethal injection at the Stateville Penitentiary in Illinois. He passed away just after midnight. His last remarks were aggressive and rude. "Kiss my ass." Many people found these words shocking, indicating that he had no remorse for what he had done. Gacy's life was filled with darkness. He deceived and harmed numerous people, and his story left an indelible impression on society. His actions sparked fear, and many people sought justice. Even in his final moments, Gacy disregarded the pain he caused. His legacy is one of horror and sadness, affecting numerous families and communities. His execution marked the conclusion of a dark chapter in criminal history, prompting many to consider the consequences of his crimes. Number 15. Patrick Bryan Knight. Patrick Bryan Knight was on execution row for a heinous crime committed in 1991. He and an accomplice kidnapped a couple from their house and imprisoned them in the basement. The following night, Knight blindfolded them, drove them to a lonely location, and shot them. He was sentenced to capital punishment for this heinous crime. As his execution date approached, Knight sought to make his final words noteworthy. He contacted people online and by letter, asking for hilarious jokes to put in his last speech. He received more than 1,300 jokes and spent time selecting the best ones. On the day of his execution, Knight stated, "Not all of us are innocent, but those are," referring to other people on capital punishment row. He said, "Death has freed me. That is the biggest joke. I deserve it." In his final minutes, he claimed that he was not Patrick Bryan Knight and told the officials that they couldn't stop his execution. His statements were a combination of humor and defiance. Even in such a terrible situation, Knight focused on laughs rather than remorse. He also mentioned other inmates he believed were innocent, demonstrating that he still cared about justice. Number 14. Robert Alton Harris. In 1978, Robert Alton Harris and his brother, Daniel Marcus Harris, took two teenage males to a fast food restaurant. They made the boys drive them to a lonely location. There, Robert shot the lads. Following this heinous crime, they used the stolen car to rob a bank. Soon after, the cops discovered them at their home. Robert received a severe punishment and was sentenced to capital punishment in the gas chamber. His brother Daniel received a significantly lower sentence, serving only 6 years in prison. Before execution, Robert said his final words, "You can be a king or a street sweeper, but everyone dances with the Grim Reaper." This speech stunned many people because it revealed how he saw life and its end. His acts were awful, and many people were outraged and saddened for the young boys and their families. The story of Robert and Daniel Harris exemplifies how choices can lead to vastly different outcomes. While one brother faced the end of life, the other had the opportunity to live and think about what had occurred. This case raises fundamental problems regarding justice and punishment. What happens to individuals who carry out heinous acts? The final moments of a capital punishment row convict frequently elicit intense emotions, making us reflect on life, decisions, and consequences. Number 13. Johnny Frank Garrett. Johnny Frank Garrett was charged in 1981 of beating and taking the life of a nun. His case sparked a lot of debate because he was only 17 and had mental issues. Many people think he should not have been sentenced to capital punishment because of his age and mental state. Johnny grew up in a terrible home characterized by abuse and neglect. A mental health professional called his situation one of the most serious they had encountered in over 30 years. This prompted severe concerns about whether he thoroughly understood his actions. Throughout the trial, suspicions regarding his culpability arose. Some suspected that he might have been innocent because the crime mirrored those linked to a Cuban refugee already in detention. As the date of his execution approached, many individuals battled for his life, claiming that he was not treated fairly due to his mental state. The courts upheld the sentence despite their attempts, and the execution proceeded. Johnny delivered his final words on the day of his execution. He thanked his family for their love and support, emphasizing their close link. However, he did make an interesting remark, "And the rest of the world can kiss my goodbye." This statement stunned many and reflected his rage and fury. Johnny's tale is a compelling example of the complexity of justice, particularly when it comes to mental health and childhood trauma. His final moments, he has prompted serious questions about fairness of the capital punishment and how people with mental illnesses are treated in the court system. Number 12. James French. In 1958, James French committed a terrible crime. He ended the life of a driver who picked him up while hitchhiking. After being arrested, he was sentenced to life in jail. However, after completing his sentence, he realized he no longer wanted to live. Too terrified to commit suicide, James devised a drastic strategy. He opted to end the life of another convict in the hopes that the state would be forced to execute him in the electric chair. His scheme worked, and he was sentenced to capital punishment. On the day before his execution, James issued an unexpected statement. He said, "What about this for a headline in tomorrow's paper? French fries." This remark surprised many, demonstrating his dark humor even in his final hours. James's experience raises issues about the hardships that prisoners confront and the lengths to which people may go to escape their environment. His acts were excessive, indicating a profound sense of helplessness. His final remarks have become famous, exemplifying the complicated emotions and problems that might drive someone to such desperate measures. James French's case displays the horrible life that many inmates endure, as well as the brutal realities of the capital punishment. Number 11. Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos, a convicted serial assailant, was scheduled to be executed by lethal injection in Florida on October 9, 2002. Her final remarks were noted for their strangeness. "I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day, with Jesus on June 6th. Like the movie, I'll be back, like the enormous mothership." This statement aroused eyebrows and revealed her unstable mental state. Aileen was born on February 29, 1956, in Michigan. Her early life was fraught with hardship. Her parents abandoned her, and her grandparents reared her instead. Her father was a criminal who died in jail, and her mother abandoned her when she was little. Aileen began using drugs and having intimate relations when she was 12 years old. She turned to prostitution to live, frequently robbing her customers. From 1989 to 1990, Aileen shot and put to rest at least 6 men in Florida. She justified her actions as self-defense, claiming that the males had attacked her. However, in January 1991, police detained her after discovering her fingerprints at a crime scene. Aileen was tried and sentenced to capital punishment 6 times, making her the first female serial assailant profiled by the FBI. As Aileen spent time on capital punishment row, her mental health deteriorated dramatically. She showed unusual behavior, prompting numerous attorneys to appeal her case, claiming her delusions and instability. Despite these efforts, Aileen fired her counsel and insisted on proceeding with her execution. On the day of her execution, Aileen's last remarks were both horrifying and revealing. Many specialists feel her strange words reflected her severe mental health issues. It's worth noting that a large proportion of persons on capital punishment row have mental problems or brain damage, which might result in bizarre and unpleasant final remarks. These statements frequently attract the most significant media attention but highlight the complex reality that individuals experience in the legal system. Aileen Wuornos's life has been shown in several films, most notably Monster, which relates her story and delves into her problematic past. Her case continues to provoke debates about crime, punishment, and mental health, raising critical questions about how society treats people who are profoundly affected by their circumstances. Number 10. James Lewis Jackson. James Lewis Jackson endured a tumultuous life that ended in tragedy. In 1995, he married Sharon Jackson and became the father of 2 kids. However, his excessive substance usage made it impossible for him to maintain work and support his family. As his marriage deteriorated and his wife threatened to leave him, he reacted badly. In a fit of rage, James attacked Sharon and her 2 daughters. This terrible offense resulted in his arrest and conviction. When James was about to be executed, he said something unexpected. He said, "Warden, end my life." He compared his conviction in Harris County to the biblical towns of Sodom and Gomorrah, which were destroyed for their wickedness. He continued, "I'm ready to go. It's time to get the party started." These parting comments conveyed a mix of defiance and concern about his fate. His remarks demonstrated a disconnect from the gravity of his actions. Poor decisions and violence marred James's life. His acts not only claimed the lives of his family, but also resulted in his end-of-life sentence. Number 9. Barbara Graham. Barbara, aka Bloody Babs, Graham's final minutes were tense and reflective. Before being executed in the gas chamber at San Quentin in 1955, she made a remarkable remark: "Good people are always so sure they're right." This remark reflected her thoughts on life and the decisions she made. Graham's life was fraught with hardship. Growing up in a harsh home, she struggled with addiction and had several failed marriages. She eventually turned to prostitution for survival. Her life changed when she married a bartender who was also a drug addict. This relationship dissolved, and she quickly became connected with Emmett Perkins, who managed an illicit gambling enterprise. They plotted a robbery against an old widow, assuming she had a hoard of cash at home. Graham cleverly persuaded the widow to let them in by requesting to use the telephone. When the widow started screaming, Graham reacted violently, shooting her with a revolver. Amid the uproar, they ignored the money and jewels they had planned to steal. Graham and her accomplices were apprehended by police a few months later after someone turned them up. The media dubbed her Bloody Babs, owing to the brutality of her crime. She was sentenced to capital punishment in a gas chamber. On the day of her execution, while she was strapped in, Joe Ferretti, the executioner, advised her, "Now take a deep breath and it won't bother you." Graham said fiercely, "How would you know?" This exchange expressed her frustration and dread. Following her demise, her narrative was made into a film, I Want to Live. Susan Hayward earned an Academy Award for her portrayal of Graham, ensuring her terrible life story was not forgotten. Number 8. Jeffrey David Matthews. Jeffrey David Matthews' final minutes on Capital Punishment Row were filled with disturbing comments. He said, "I believe the governor's phone is broken. He had not called yet." His execution was delayed 3 times while the governor of Oklahoma investigated his claims of innocence. The last postponement occurred due to worries regarding the medications that were to be used in his execution. Matthews was charged with taking the life of his great-uncle, Otis Earl Short, in 1994. He and another man went to Short's house and robbed it. During the crime, Matthews shot his uncle in the back of the head. He also attacked Short's wife, cutting her throat, but she survived the savage assault. As Matthews awaited his fate, his words were a mixture of optimism and sorrow. He appeared to be holding out hope that anything would change. His case aroused debate about justice and the capital punishment, calling into doubt the court system's legitimacy. For many, his final comments emphasized the difficulties of guilt and innocence. In those difficult moments, Matthews' words had an impact, reminding us of the gravity of life and its end in the legal system. Number 7. Peter Kürten. Peter Kürten, sometimes known as the Vampire of Dusseldorf, was a German criminal from the early 1990s. He gained this nickname for his surprising behavior, which included injuring people. From February to November 1929, Peter Kürten committed several violent crimes in Dusseldorf. Before these acts, he had a long history of criminal activity, including arson and attempting to injure others. Kürten also acknowledged a previous event in 1913 that involved the taking the life of a young girl in Mülheim am Rhein, as well as an attempt to damage a 17-year-old female in Dusseldorf. As he faced execution by guillotine, Kürten made a frightening last plea. He questioned his psychiatrist, "Will I be able to hear anything after my execution? That would be the greatest pleasure." His statements demonstrated a peculiar fixation with his end and what happened in the dying minutes. Kürten's curiosity regarding the encounter exposed a darker aspect of his personality. He seemed obsessed with understanding every aspect, even in his final moments. This disconcerting request heightened the terrible character of his story. People were left wondering what went through someone's mind to think this way. Kürten's acts and ideas continue to captivate people who examine his life. Number 6. Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy spent the night before his execution crying and praying. He was scheduled to end-of-life sentence in the electric chair at Florida's Stark State Prison on January 24, 1989, at 7 in wee morning. When the moment came, Superintendent Tom Barton asked Bundy if he had any final remarks. Bundy responded, "Jim and Fred, I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." He spoke with his lawyer, Jim Coleman, and Fred Lawrence, a Methodist pastor who had spent the evening praying with him. Both men nodded, indicating their comprehension. Ted Bundy, real name Theodore Robert Bundy, was a notable serial assailant. He admitted to ending the life of 30 women between 1974 and 1979 in many states, including Washington, Utah, Colorado, and Florida. Many people believe the actual number of his victims could be more than 100. Bundy's final remarks revealed a connection with those he loved. Even as he approached the end of his life, he chose to convey affection over remorse. His execution was a watershed moment in history, bringing an end to the life of one of America's most notorious criminals. Number 5. Timothy McVeigh. Timothy McVeigh, often known as the Oklahoma City Bomber, was executed by lethal injection on June 11, 2001, in Indiana. In his final moments, he had no last words to say. However, he left a handwritten statement quoting a poem by British poet William Ernest Henley. The poem famously concludes with, "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." These remarks illustrate his ability to manage his destiny, even after his life. McVeigh was convicted of bombing the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building on April 19, 1995. This heinous crime put to rest 149 people and 19 children, making it one of the bloodiest atrocities in American history. The bombing left countless families in mourning and caused significant damage to the city of Oklahoma. Following his capture, McVeigh admitted that his intentions were fueled by rage against the federal government. The government's behavior especially angered him during the Ruby Ridge incident in 1992 and the Waco siege in 1993. He argued that these incidents demonstrated a trend of government overreach and violence against citizens. His execution was a watershed moment in the country's history, bringing an end to a difficult chapter for the families devastated by the bombing. While McVeigh's lack of final words surprised many, his handwritten note highlighted his perspective on power and fate. His experience serves as a reminder of the risks of fanaticism and the devastation caused by hatred. His acts have had an ongoing impact, emphasizing the significance of identifying and resolving the core causes of societal violence. Number 4. Gilmore. Gilmore was set to be executed by a volunteer firing squad in Utah on January 17, 1977. His final comments were forceful and direct. "Let's do it." After putting on a black hood, he said, "Dominus vobiscum," which means, "The Lord be with you." Reverend Thomas Mearsman, the Roman Catholic prison priest, said, "Et cum spiritu tuo," which means, "and with your spirit." This exchange emphasized the solemnity of the event. Gilmore, born on December 4, 1940, was found guilty of ending the life of a motel manager in Provo, Utah. He was also charged with taking the life of a gas station employee the previous day, but he was never convicted. Gilmore's demise was a watershed moment in American history, as he was the first person legally executed since 1967, breaking a 10-year halt in executions across the country. Gilmore chose to donate his organs in an impressive display of charity. Following his execution, 2 people got his corneas, granting them the gift of sight. His case aroused debate over the end-of-life sentence and its ramifications. Gilmore's confident final remarks, as well as his decision to donate his organs, had a long-lasting impact on American issues about justice and capital punishment. Number 3. George Appel. In 1928, George Appel faced his demise by electric chair in New York for taking the life of a police officer. He delivered an unexpected joke in his closing minutes that drew widespread notice. He said, "Well, gentlemen, you are about to see a baked Appel." Some accounts claim he said, "All the ladies love baked apples," followed by, "Damn, no power outage." As he was strapped into the electric chair, Appel appeared to find humor in the dire circumstances. His final remarks soon traveled throughout the media, becoming more renowned than the crime he committed. While he was convicted of first degree, little is known about the actual crime. Instead, people remarked on his uncommon sense of humor in such a difficult situation. Appel's lighthearted remarks raised eyebrows and piqued suspicion. Some considered it remarkable that he could joke before facing the end of life, while others were impressed by his ability to chuckle in such a dire position. This reaction showed the intricacies of human conduct, particularly toward the end of life. Number 1. Jimmy Glass. Jimmy Glass was executed by electrocution in Louisiana on June 12, 1987, for robbing and ending the life of a couple on Christmas Eve. His last words were surprising: "I'd rather be fishing." This simple phrase expressed a desire for a different existence. Glass is also recognized for his role in a 1985 Supreme Court decision. He claimed that electrocution violated the 8th and 14th Amendments of the United States Constitution because it was cruel and unusual punishment. However, the Supreme Court rejected his argument and allowed electrocution to continue. His final comments expressed a wish for freedom and a more tranquil life, reminding audiences that even those approaching execution had human emotions. Many people remember Glass not only for his crime, but also for the legal fight he led against capital punishment. Jimmy Glass's experience raises severe concerns about justice and punishment in America. His case aroused debate on the techniques of execution and their ethical implications. Even in his final moments, Glass voiced a desire for something new, emphasizing the intricacies of human nature when faced with the end of life. Thanks for watching. More interesting content on the way.